we opened the car door, and this not very big man, two men, this the car door, and there's 1, 2, 3 men, and then there's 1, 2 more behind them.
You can remember everything now.
There's a man on each side of him, and my eyes are open. But Barney's still asleep. He's walking and he's asleep. So I turn around and I say, Barney, wake up. Barney, why don't you wake up?
We are live. Welcome, Dave and Damien, to our Betty and Barney Hill show. Barney, Barney, why don't you awake, Barney?
I like that introduction, the Betty and Barney Hill show.
It's the Betty and Barney Hill show.
You're one step away from the Benny Hill show.
Yeah. Oh, man. Do you know when else ever think the Benny Hill show was just not even remotely funny? Was that just me?
No, it's not
allowed
actually.
to show it anymore, I wouldn't imagine, given today's PC world. Be one of those.
Incorrect.
PC World, are you advertising a business there or something? I mean...
Yeah, other computer retail outlets are available.
Yeah.
Hey, Bazza.
Evening, Bazza. How you diddling? Right, guys. So we're talking Betty and Barney Hill. Some people, many people, believe this to be one of the most important UFO abduction cases in history. Some people consider it to be the first. Just before we get going, what is your initial instincts on this when you first heard about this case? Does anybody have like any really strong feelings about it?
Well,
Go with Damien, sorry, go on.
I suppose UFOlogy, as it goes, or UFOologists sort of believe that this is kind of the abduction story that kind of gave rise to even the culture of alien abductions.
Is this the Roswell abductions?
Yeah, I guess you could, yeah.
Indeed it is. I mean, it's certainly looked at, or certainly viewed as one of the big three, as it were. You know, you've got this, you obviously got the Travis Walton case, and, you know, I suppose you've got Whitley Strieber. They're sort of like the big ones that have sort of like catapulted them to the fore. And as you said before, it sort of is looked at as being the instigator of abduction cases. It certainly is, especially as far as Project Blue Book's concerned, because it did start off prompt a United States Air Force investigation. So
it did get reported to Blue Book, right? Yeah. So should we just go through the basic facts before we come back? So I was going to find the thing. So the basic facts: September 19th, 20th, 1961. They lived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. They were considered community leaders. Barney was a United States postal worker. Betty worked for social services. They were an interracial couple back in the 60s. They reckon they never got any grief for being an interracial couple back in the 60s. That seems unlikely to me, but they said they had a very happy relationship and they were churchgoers and they never really had any grief or threats or anything like that.
By all accounts, they were they were actually fairly high up in leading human rights marches and stuff like that. They were very active in that kind of thing.
They were both considered community leaders, weren't they? Definitely.
Yeah, they were sort of like highly thought of, at least in the area that they were from. So perhaps what they say is correct.
But perhaps the area they lived in was a very progressive area for the time as well, very forward thinking, maybe quite affluent, money, and therefore were capable of critical thinking and realizing, obviously, that, you know,
they weren't. They're in New England. They weren't in the Bible Belt, were they? Let's be honest.
Exactly.
They were very active in the civil rights movement. They were very active players, well known and well established in the civil rights movement.
So on 3 nights before this event, they decided to go on an impromptu visit to Niagara Falls. Been there, beautiful, loved it. I did the whole honeymoon thing there. No imagination, me. I just went, let's go to Niagara Falls, babe. So yeah, they went to Niagara Falls. They went to Montreal. They're driving home. They left to drive home at about 10 p.m. They said they did this on purpose. They wanted to miss the traffic, what have you. They planned to be home by 3 p.m. that night. Betty saw the light first. She said this was somewhere between Moon and Jupiter. She thought it was a fallen star. They were driving along Route 3. Betty observed the light moving, and she said she thought it was a shooting star, but then it started sort of going upwards, and then it started doing all these erratic behaviors. So she begged Barney to stop so that they could both look at it. Turns out her sister had actually seen a UFO a few days earlier. Think that's relevant?
Yes, for reasons I will go into later. I think it needs to be mentioned that another reason that they left at the time that they'd stop for a coffee at a diner in Vermont. They left at 10 p.m. was also to avoid an approaching hurricane because they were aware of adverse weather conditions that were about to hit the area. So they wanted to leave because of an incoming hurricane, and they sort of estimated that they get back by about 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, most definitely. So they stopped near South Twin Mountain. South Twin Mountain also should be pointed out that that's got a very large, bright sort of antenna light on the top of it.
Yeah.
Whether that's relevant or not. Betty got binoculars out. She's looking at this thing. Apparently, there are binoculars in the car. Looking at things. She said it was odd shapes, had coloured lights. They decided to get back in the car and go for it. They decided to bug out of there. So they're driving towards Franconia Notch. They drove quite slowly because they're still looking out the window, so they're going, "Oh, look, it's following us." They're on a very isolated road. Obviously, nothing else is about, of course. And then they were about 1 mile south of Indian Head, and they described the object suddenly descended upon them. The craft hovered 1,800 feet near them in some in an open area to the side. Barney said he was like compelled to stop the vehicle. He then got his pistol out, apparently, that he also carried in his car. I suppose it's 1960s and they were an interracial couple, so that might be relevant. And he decided to go and have a look at the object. He saw this, he keeps calling it a pancake shape, which I've seen a lot of sort of people talk about this. Why is he calling it a pancake? Why is he calling it a pancake? And I'm like, well, it's just 60s as well. We didn't have the same terminology we have. So he was very breakfast based in his descriptions, which I don't have a problem with. So he then gets the binoculars. He zooms in on the object and he sees this pancake shaped thing, which he's drawn since, and he can see 10 or 11 objects, or 8 to 11 objects, people in the windows of this object. They then all of a sudden sort of disappeared, and he can only see one left. He said he had some sort of psychic link, and they were telling him to stay where he was and just to keep looking. But he decided he was getting them out of there. So he turns, he runs for it. He shouts to his wife, "They're going to capture us! Let's get out of here," sort of thing. In a complete panic. They both described him having very dull feelings, and they got a bit confused about what was going on after that. They apparently drove 35 miles, but have no recollection of it. And then they described seeing or being almost like driven off the road. They said they kept saying they come across like a roadblock, and there was a fiery orb. But there's not a lot of description on exactly what that was. Other people have said maybe that was the moon or something else. But they said this fiery orb. They then don't really know what happened after that.
Can I jump in for a sec, please, Jamie?
Go for it.
Could I just jump in? Yeah, like you said, he saw what he thought he described as being a pancake, and he tried to pick up his pistol apparently, but he couldn't. And he heard what was a voice in his head, Barney, telling him to put down his binocular, or not to put down his binoculars. And then that's when he thought we're going to get captured and started running back to the car hysterically, as you said, and then like legged it. And Betty was still watching the craft. She was leaning out the window to watch it. And then they described what they heard as loud rhythmic beeping sounds coming from the car's trunk. We'd call it a boot. They heard loud rhythmic beeping sounds coming. And then they said, this is obviously later on, that when they started to hear the loud rhythmic beeping sounds, they start to feel instantly drowsy. And that's when they lost consciousness. And as you said, they came round then 2 hours later, 35 miles down the road, and with 2 hours missing time.
Yeah.
They then reported that they basically then got home at 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning. Betty said that they'd had a couple hours sleep sort of thing. And then when they got up, Betty described how they, like the bags were just by the back door. She wouldn't normally leave them there. As they started sort of examining the things, she found that her dress had been ripped. There was a pink powderish substance all over the one dress. She was going to throw the dress away. and then something sort of stopped her, and she thought, no, I shouldn't get rid of it, and she hung it up and kept it. They then went out and checked the car. The car had, like I said, these circular patchy marks on the trunk.
Indeed.
When they then took their the compass, they wanted to like check sort of like, I think they were thinking about maybe magnetism or something. Apparently the compasses were going fucking go crazy sort of thing when they went anywhere near these round circular indentations or marks that were on the bonnet of the vehicle. He should also describe that he did say when he decided to leg it, he did say that there was sort of like wings coming out of the pancake thing he described as, and he said that he felt like they were sort of moving or coming towards him or something somehow. And they both described that these people, or that he saw at the time, were not human, but it was sort of they're not human somehow. They didn't really ever, at this point at least, be able to put their finger on what wasn't right about them, for want of a better way of putting it.
Okay, can I just jump in again a sec? Sorry, I don't want to be a pain, but I've done quite a bit on this. Initially, the reports that they were given is that he would describe them as people. Barney actually described them as people.
They keep calling them as men.
Yeah, he never referred to them as anything other than what were either people or men until later. In fact, most of the references towards them being not people or being alien or anything other was after he'd passed away from a brain tumor, which was within about 18 months of the event, I believe, or something like that.
A couple of years, 1969.
So a lot of what went on it was propagated by Betty after the event, which
it's Betty
cover later on, no doubt.
They were human. They were not quite human, or something like that was how she described it. But she wouldn't go as far as saying aliens. But a little bit more.
She did. She did later on. Actually, she did make these claims. Yeah, she was. She did come under a lot of ridicule because a lot of the claims that she made retrospectively, and even to the extent of being. We'll come back to that. Yeah.
Well, let's say the physical damage. She said her shoes were scuffed. Boo-hoo. She was attacked by aliens and her shoes were scuffed. Who cares? The binocular strap was broken. They'd had no recollection how. Their watches had stopped and never worked again, apparently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the 60s. An unreliable watch. Shocking.
Who'd have thought?
Her dress was torn. They both said afterwards, well, they didn't both say this because it would be very random, but Barney said that he had an overwhelming desire to sort of like check his genitals, and he didn't really know why. And I was like, that's just being a bloke, because I check my genitals every day. That's the excuse I use for the wife anyway. They showered constantly, and they said like they were trying to scrub something off, but again they weren't really aware of what. And that carried on for a little bit of time. Now there is some inconsistencies in the story that comes around now, because a lot of the time they talk about. Let me just get to notes. So September 21st, Betty called Peace Air Force Base to report the encounter. Major Paul W. Henderson interviewed her. He decided it was a misidentified Jupiter sighting. She saw Jupiter, misidentified. Actually thought she was possibly crazy, but did forward the report to Blue Book, to Operation Blue Book. They reported as well that at that point, she did withhold certain pieces of information, but she did say something about hypnosis to this Major Paul. Later in the story, though, we're going to talk about hypnosis again, but another version of this story suggests that hypnosis was never mentioned until they were interviewed by UFO researchers much later down the road. But apparently in the report, she was thinking about hypnosis really early on. And again, as we get later in the story, I think we need to try to remember that point, because I think it might be relevant. So, Sean Willits, thank you very much, mate. And yeah, this is one I didn't know much about until I started doing the research. So she did that September 21st. September 22nd, this report went in. Around that time, Betty then borrowed a book from a local UFO website. The website that didn't exist in 1960, from the library. 10 days after the event is when the dreams started. So what do we know about the dreams? There were 5 nights. this is when the details started coming in, and when the sort of hints of aliens sort of started happening. She described that 5 men surrounded the car. 2 men forced her to walk out into some woods. She said, again, there was repeat this thing about there being some sort of roadblock. She talked about being in and out of consciousness. She described them as being 4 feet tall, in some sort of uniform and caps similar to the military, which again came out more in the hypnosis sessions later. She talked about walking onto the dish, speaking to the leader. No real details about that. How her and Barney were taken into 2 separate rooms and examined by the leader. She called it being like a physical exam. They were like taking skin samples and scraping under her nails. At one point, there was a needle jabbed into her abdomen. She said it was incredibly painful, but then the leader just sort of like waved his hand in front of her face and the pain just went away, which is nice.
Can I just jump in again?
Go for it.
April, I can't wave because my camera's not on at the minute, April, but I'll say hi because I can see you in the chat saying, can you have a wave, please? So there's the interaction. I'll say hi, and I'm sure the guys will follow.
I haven't seen the comment. Hi, April. Right, so then they were taken out of the saucer, apparently, and the leader had given her a book, but at this point we weren't told a great deal about what this book was. We found out more in the hypnosis sessions. But then apparently the aliens had a bit of an argument, and they weren't happy, and they decided that they should take the book off her, which was gutted because that would be really good evidence. And then that they decided that she shouldn't remember the encounter. So their mind control
apparently
is crap.
Sorry, Jamie. Apparently it was the leader, or what she assumed to be the leader, tried to hand her a book, and the other EBEs sort of like rebelled against it. There was a little bit of a commotion as they was saying, you can't do that. You can't. They didn't like it, so because of that, she wasn't allowed to bring the book with her. But she was shown the map and could redraw the map, which we can go into later as well.
Yeah. But the LSD thing, we're going to talk about MK Ultra a bit later, mate. So hold that thought. So, where am I?
I think it's also worth mentioning that she claimed to punch one of these extraterrestrials too.
Oh God, I've not read that.
Yes, she claimed to have punched. She punched one in the mouth.
Good girl.
This didn't come out at the time.
I don't think that's really plausible, because how can they not control you?
Of course, yeah, I completely understand that. None of this came out when she spoke to Dr. Benjamin Simon under a hypnosis. None of this came out then. This was a lot later on again. However, I'm merely saying she claimed to have punched one of these extraterrestrials in the mouth yeah, absolutely, yeah. As they,
this is like when we were all out of the beer, like, I knocked him on his ass.
Yeah,
dropped him,
and then 6 of his mates jumped me.
Yeah, there you go. Took them all on. So, 1961, November 25th, they were interviewed by C.D. Jackson and Robert E. Hoffman. Hoffman? Oh, my handwriting is terrible.
Hoffman, yeah.
These guys, they seem to be. Oh no, I've jumped ahead a little bit. Sorry, I have jumped ahead a little bit. I've missed a bit.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm sure we'll cover it back if you have.
Yeah,
I've missed a little bit. Anyway, so through this book that she wrote, she got in contact with this one chap who got in touch. Who was the leader of this group? Was it IATIP or something? There's a UFO research group. These guys, Jackson and Hoffman, are members of that group, and they came to interview her. It seemed to me they were leading towards aliens a little bit. They spoke about the fiery orbs. Betty and Barney apparently believed that the fiery orb they saw at the roadblock was probably the moon. These guys pointed out how the moon had set by then, so it wasn't the moon. You saw something else. They apparently, according to their records, then suggested hypnosis. Again, this is a little bit inconsistent to what was said earlier.
They sought mental help because Betty was like real. Sorry, Jamie, but Betty was really she was a massively avid reader, and she'd been checking out the books. The library that she went to was actually from the NICAP, you know, the civilian UFO group NICAP, the National Investigation Committee on Aerial Phenomena, by the way, people. And the reason that she reported it to the Air Force in the first place, because allegedly it wasn't that she thought it was due to it being extraterrestrial or anything else. They were concerned about radiation, as you said, like they felt like the need to wash something off. So they were concerned about radiation from whatever it is, which is why they approached the Air Force, and they were sort of pushed into getting hypnosis to find out what had actually gone on. They didn't actually seek it. I think they developed ulcers and started to suffer from anxiety issues, having panic attacks and things like that.
Barney kept developed ulcers, got quite poorly at times. I've not read anything to say Betty did, but Barney was quite unwell.
She was having dreams. She had lucid dreams that were giving her nightmares for something like 2 or 3 days, really intense nightmares.
Nights. She had these really intense dreams for 5 nights, which is where that stuff I just said came from. So they suggested hypnosis. Barney was well against it. He said her dreams are just nonsense. He was apparently dead set against any sort of hypnosis, thought it was phooey, wanted to let this thing go. But he was passionate that from early 1962 onwards, the Hills kept going back and trying to like retrace their steps, and trying to like find out where the fiery orb site was. They never were able to find that, but they did find on Labor Day weekend in 1965. They did apparently find where they believe the capture site was. So they were desperately trying to understand what had happened to them. They then met this guy in this Captain Sweat. I'm saying Sweat.
It's Sweet, Captain Sweet.
SWETT. Sweat. In 1963, some church lectures, and he sort of gave them advice, and they sort of approached him and sort of said, well, you know, because he was giving them a lecture about hypnosis and things, and he sort of said, well, yeah, hypnosis could help you, and he sort of twigged that he was very interested in the missing time they talked about. So, but he said, well, look, don't talk to me. I'm not a hypnotist. Go to a professional sort of thing. Don't go to somebody that's an amateur. He sort of
good advice, I guess.
Yeah, it's good advice. Particularly for anything that messes with your brain. But Barney was unwell enough, sort of thing, by this point, or stressed and had a lot of anxiety that he had planned to see a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist then referred him to a hypnotist, Benjamin Simon of Boston. So there we're getting into the hypnosis.
Indeed, we are.
So from early 1964, they started these hypnosis therapies. I will say as well that apparently the hypnosis worked. They both reported that they felt much better afterwards. Really helped with anxiety, the sessions, particularly seeing Barney. If you're at the start of the video, you did hear little clippets of Betty in particular audio. And I put a slightly longer audio on our Facebook channel. If you go and join Facebook channel, if you're new to that, Mystery Machines, it's in the description, links in the description. She was, to say the least, upset in her interviews. I think it's fair to say it's actually quite hard to listen to. She is very distressed.
Hysterical.
Almost hysterical, yeah. I think that's one of the main reasons these audio recordings is why it was then so well believed, particularly like Stanton Friedman and people research this very heavily. It's hard not to believe that at very least she believes what she's saying.
I would argue that Barney's was the most compelling when you listen to Barney's. I done a live stream on this last year and I played the audio clips. I played quite a lot of audio clips. And again, I'm not trying to plug anything I've done, but if anybody wants to listen to the audio clips, they are on a stream from last year. And thank you, sir. These audio clips are, and if they could be used for the edited version you do, feel free to do it, by the way, Jay. They are there. And when you do hear Barney, his responses to the questions, he is absolutely beside himself with fear, and it's massively compelling. It is disturbing to listen to Barney's response to these sessions he's having with Dr. Simon. So really worth listening to if you're into the case beyond a shadow of a doubt.
I have actually put links to Betty's in the description. I did struggle to find Barney's after it, but I have listened to segments of Barney's, and the thing about Barney as well is he seemed to be more. He had more sort of like almost sensible answers, but they were both terrified. One of the things Betty talks about was saying that she wasn't scared at the time. It's remembering it and thinking back at it that she was hysterical thinking about, and that she was terrified of. But
probably something to do with fear of the unknown, which is I suppose a natural thing. And when you have perhaps memories stolen from you, maybe that's where the brain defaults to.
Well, this hypnotist Simon as well, when he started to push Barney, he decided not to go too far with him because he realized that there'd been a trauma. So he was actually really careful not to sort of get too in depth too quickly, because he thought, I'm just going to end up repeating the trauma and causing more damage here.
And also caused him to forget what they'd been through for many sessions before he felt he was okay to.
Yeah. Well, this is anything in like counsel and anything like this. You can, if you go too fast, too quick, you'll take one step forward and 10 steps back. So, this guy actually seemed to know what he's talking about. The one thing Barney said that I'd love to talk about for a minute is this quote of, I felt like his eyes had pushed into my eyes. One of the things they talk about in the hypnosis thing is that when they're talking to the leader, the conversations are in English.
Yeah,
but
correct.
None of them had been able to see their mouths move.
Mm-hmm.
But none of them say anything about psychic that I've heard anyway, or psychic link. They just infer this. And it comes to me that this is a little bit like the pancake thing. They're describing stuff that we've then described ever since. But these guys were like the first ones to do it. So they didn't have like the vernacular.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So they seem to be talking about something that he didn't understand. And that to me is really almost like poetic, that I felt like his eyes had pushed into my eyes. Like that this guy had actually, that this alien, this entity was psychically linked to him.
Yeah, there was sort of like inferring telepathy and sort of thought transference without using the terminology.
Exactly. And that sort of like rings true to me, though, that they're trying to describe something they don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
If it was all a lie, how are they describing something they don't understand? Do you know what I mean? Is what I'm getting at? It's
I totally understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah. So Betty's sessions are apparently really similar to her dreams, and she talked about the same things. But this is when this map sort of became important. So she said the leader had given her a book and showed her this map. That's another bit actually that sort of rings true for me. Betty says he took this map out of like a drawer, but then she says, but it wasn't a drawer. The metal just sort of opened. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, again, she was seeing something that we might sort of say, well, we've seen that from sci-fi movies, or say it's nanotechnology or whatever, or smart metals or something. But she was trying to describe something that she didn't have the words for.
Yes.
The panel just sort of like opened, even though there were no markings or seams, and he was able to take this map from within inside this console or whatever. Yeah. The leader.
You can't explain the material that it's made from. You can't explain the structure. It comes out of and then goes back into the wall. What?
Yeah.
So apparently they had this amazing technology to have these seamless drawers that just open, but they still use paper because the map seems. She never mentioned anything about the map not being. It sounds like it was just a piece of paper.
I read it was a hologram.
It was a hologram.
I listened to her interview today. She doesn't describe it as that. She just describes it as the map. But as she elaborated later.
This is the issue with Betty. This is the issue with Betty is what gets said later on to what actually got when she initially reported what happened and the way things changed after Barney's death.
Yeah. Right. So,
yes, unfortunately, who doesn't like to embellish though, or exaggerate in stories? I think all humans are guilty of that to some extent. Just down the pub, exactly. You embellish, don't you, and exaggerate. So as she gets more and more into a UFOlogy and down that road, exactly. I can see her sort of wanting to escalate her incident back up to the peak and adding things in, perhaps. I don't know. It's probably a natural
Yeah.
There was also people that think that it was a insistence to want to be at the forefront and in public attention and in the public eye for other agendas that made her elaborate on it and push, even suggest things to Barney that didn't actually happen on the night, and try to change his version of events if you look deep enough. And there was lots of interviews and again, like these hypnotherapy sessions, and there's a lot more behind what went on with Barney at the time. I mean, things like finding a pile of leaves on the table and buried underneath from nowhere. Didn't know where these leaves had come from, and then underneath this pile of leaves were missing earrings. Things like this. Well, none of this was reported on the event, and it's a fairly substantial thing. So why has that only come to light in 1970s? Long after Barney had passed away, there's embellishing, and then there's out and out making things up. Yeah. True. Although your point is still your point is valid, Damien. I'm just saying though, but some of it's a bit, really.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not wholeheartedly forgiving her. I'm just, it is something we do.
Well, so we'll discuss the star map a bit later, because I do think it's interesting and what they then. After the book was released in the 70s. But she drew this star map. She did it from memory after the hypnosis session, and she talks about how the leader was describing this map to her, and she sort of said that, these are the trade routes, and when there's the solid lines and there's a dashed line, these are occasional routes, and says these are sort of expedition routes, sort of thing. And then she apparently said, well, what planet do you come from?
What star system?
What star system do you come from? Yeah. And he sort of said, well, do you know where you are on the map? And she said, well, no. So, well, what's the point in me telling you where I am then?
Yeah, he did say that.
I'd have just gone, I'm there. You're here, I'm there. Lovely. Next. But it is a good point. What's the point in telling you don't know where you are? So.
And just say, show me. If they're talking to you telepathically, they know you don't know anyway. If they're in your
exactly.
head.
Good point.
That is a good point.
Show you. Like how in Paul, when he gives over a telekinetic bridge, when he touches fingers and he just transfers all his consciousness and experience. I just think that just reminds me of that. I don't know why.
Thank you, Tammy, for that little contribution.
I gave you a contribution before, and you didn't say anything to me.
I did see it, but I was going to thank you afterwards. I'm joking.
I'm joking.
No, I was seriously going to give you a kiss and a cuddle later.
Oh, good man. Everybody donate to the channel, please.
Yeah, join if you really want to.
Yeah.
So this carried on a little bit. There's more stuff come out in the hypnosis sessions. Simon believed, Dr. Simon, that they had some sort of traumatic event. He genuinely was concerned for Barney in particular, but he never really subscribed to the UFO event. Doris Lives has just become a member. Thank you. You can also become a member if you want to give us money. Thank you. You get a shout out now whenever you're on, Dave. So Dave, welcome to the members club. So they apparently then went away, and they never really pushed for fame and fortune, according to a lot of the stories. But the story did get out. So October 25th, the same year, Boston traveler, Robert L. Luttrell, got hold of the story. He apparently got hold of a lecture that the Hills had done in Quincy Center in 1963. So the bit I just said about them not looking for fame, they were apparently, though, doing lectures. But
yes, they were. This is why I contested it when he said it, really, is because there was a lot that came to light afterwards about, especially with the civil rights movements and the, like we're saying, the mixed race and equality and all that. Like they were, especially Betty, she was massively, and fair enough about the, civil rights and everything, obviously.
Well, exactly, yeah. So, so the story got out. Just going to go on to going viral. So this Lutrick guy got hold of these an audio tape from this lecture. He also apparently got hold of some of the notes from some of the UFO investigators. So somebody, now I'm not suggesting this was Betty, but I am. Somebody gave this guy all this information, all right, and gave him notes that the investigators had given. What's the name? Betty? I'm thinking that everyone says that they weren't after a lot of fanfare, but I actually think Betty was, and I think like what you've alluded to a little bit, Dave, that she went.
In a later life, definitely so. Perhaps not in the early mid '60s so much, but because of the political climate then, and possibly, although they didn't seem to have any problems being an interracial couple, you can imagine it wouldn't have been. You wouldn't have thought they'd have wanted the limelight that much because of that, but then because they're involved in the civil rights stuff, they were in the limelight anyway. So,
well, to be fair, I mean, they were pushing a book that they sort of instigated by John G. Fuller in 1966 called The Interrupted Journey. So, just a couple of years after it, they were pushing it in the mid '60s. Betty, she certainly was.
Well, it's
it really sounds like I'm hating on Betty Hill here, and I'm not. I'm just pointing out facts.
No, it's just the facts. I mean, there's another thing.
Speaking of the dead, Dave.
Thank you, man.
There's another thing though. That actually, Barney was on telly in 1965.
Yes.
I've put the clip on our channel. If you pop back to Brief History Mystery, the clip I put on earlier, it's at the end of that. It's like a whose line is anyway type of thing. There's these three people. One of them's a liar. One of them's telling the truth, and two of them are lying. And it says they tell their story, and then there's a panel, and they have to sort of guess who's the really Barney Hill. And I found that I was just like, what? He's. The big
That's
thing
definitely trying to popularise the story, isn't it? Without a shadow of a doubt,
But one of the big things that people use for this, and ufologists use this to push that it's genuine and real, is that these guys shunned the limelight and didn't want to be famous. He was on a pigging quiz show. I mean, that is saying, and yes, you are handsome, Dave. So that seems a bit dodgy to me. Barney did die in 1969 from a cerebral hemorrhage, like you said, Dave. He'd suffered with illness and stress and anxiety pretty much from the day this event happened. And yeah, that's pretty much the story in a nutshell. But then obviously it goes on much further, because then after the book, there was a TV movie. Then there was then a second book in 1973.
Yeah,
that was hugely popular. That lady, that's when the map was printed in that book. So,
right, can I hit on this just for a second? Okay. Now the map, the wonderful map, that became again famous or infamous, whichever, come out a lot later on again. But after the event, anyway, the thing about the map is propagated by our primary school teacher, Marjorie Fish. She analysed the map, this star map, and she made a 3D model of it out of fishing line and plastic balls. And she used the I think it was the Gleiser pronunciation. I apologise, Gleiser or Glaise star map from 1969. And she looked for a star that was similar to our sun for the possibility of like a life-sustaining planet kind of thing. And she looked at it from a multitude of different angles and points and stuff like that. And the only one that matched both the model that she'd made of the map in a 3D sense and Betty's map was from the viewpoint of Zeta Reticuli. And for anybody who's interested, it's a binary star system, about 39.3 light years from Earth. Or if you're interested, 231,084,127,000,000 miles.
How many, sorry?
Incomprehensible, isn't it, in miles? There's no point not even thinking about that kind of number.
What's that in kilometres, Dave?
A lot. Um,
Thousands left.
Yeah, yeah, it is pretty much, yeah. And these twin stars are what were considered in astronomy as a solar analogues because they share very similar characteristics as our sun. And like so, Zeta 1's got like 96% mass and 84% radius as our sun, and Zeta Reticuli 2's got 99% mass and 88% radius of the sun. So very, very similar, and that's why they considered these solar analogues. And that's sort of like the viewpoint she was going off this Gliese type of map. But she was a school teacher. Marjorie Fish is the woman that came up with this. So going off her standpoint, you know what I mean?
She was an amateur astronomer. And to be fair to her,
there's a clue in the word
amateur. I know. She
and
did
it isn't the astronomer bit I'm going for, you know.
Yeah,
everybody
she did then send her.
Everybody looks up at the night sky.
Yeah, correct.
Well, yeah. She then sent her findings to like some astronomers' weekly magazine, which I've neglected to write the type name down. And there was mixed reviews. To be fair, some people jumped on board and went, "This is marvelous, well done." Other people said this was very rare for this magazine. They actually then kept it basically open and sort of said, "We will take comments." One of the comments came from Carl Sagan. Guess what he said?
I know what he said.
He wasn't massively impressed.
No.
So yeah, he refuted the argument. He basically said these are just a random series of dots, and it only really fits the model of what we've got for Zeta Reticuli because of a bunch of assumptions that Marjorie Fish has made. You can't go from a two-dimensional drawing into a three-dimensional world into a star chart. It doesn't work.
No, you can sort of make a 3D. You can sorry, Jamie. You can sort of make a 3D model fit a 2D image and claim it to work from any standpoint that you wish to suit your narrative. Because you're changing the parameters of it, the depth, all the rest of it. He's condemned it because she said she looked at it from a multitude of standpoints and views, and it's like, well, if you do that, you are likely to find some way of matching up the different points if you look at it from enough points, not the standpoint of where they claim to be and where the map was supposed to have been taken from. Sorry, Damien.
Well, the estimates now, 300 to 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. So I'd imagine there's several different viewpoints that would match any particular 3D mapped image onto it.
Absolutely, yeah.
She had to make several assumptions about the distances of the stars as well to create this 3D model. But to be fair to Marjorie, she has actually retracted her hypothesis since. Several studies have been done that's actually realised that some of these stars are actually much, much further away than we believed. And she didn't have enough.
She didn't have enough fishing line. That's it. She didn't have enough fishing line to do the three. Yeah, she ran out of fishing line.
She made some guesses, but fair to play to her. Once it was, even though some people have still sort of defend this finding and still think that it is Zeta Reticuli, and we'll talk about Bob Lazar in 1 second.
Oh dear.
As soon as the evidence came,
the grays, isn't it?
Yeah, she pulled it back. She said, "That's that." Zeta Reticuli is one of those star systems that we point telescopes at a lot. If you look at studies of this, it is considered to be a star system that is possible. Is one down on. They've got a list of possible star systems that could have inhabitable life. This is pretty high up.
Yeah.
Particularly because of its closeness. But we put a lot of there's some satellite that things, and it spends weeks every year looking at Zeta Reticuli, taking evidence.
They found any Earth-like planets around.
I believe they have, but they found planets around like 3/4 of the stars to look at. But
I'm not sure if they have or not.
They detect the wobble, don't they, around the image, which suggests there's something orbiting it. Yeah.
Oh, I know they do the wobble detection method. What I mean is they haven't they like now that 2,000 Earth-like planets found in habitable zones around in Goldilocks zone around stars of similar mass of ours or smaller red dwarfs as well.
I thought it was more than that at the moment. So it was something like that, if not more now. Yeah,
they're estimating at least 3/4 or whatever Earth-like planets. But Bazza has just asked a question there about how do they know these stars away, how far these stars are away.
Red and blue shift. They use spectral analysis and the Doppler effect. Yeah, by what they call red and blue shifts. They know which direction they're moving in and how long it takes the light to hit because they know the speed of light. So they trace red and blue shift out of phase spectral analysis to check the distances
and then guess. There's an element of guessing.
There is, yeah.
One of the things they have to do is they have really good measurements on things like what are the stars that pulse?
A pulsar.
A pulsar. Thank you, God.
Yeah, pulsar. Yeah.
It's been a long day. So they have really good knowledge of where pulsars are, and then they can sort of they can use that to sort of triangulate positions of other stars and things. But yeah, the redshift, isn't it? As the stars moving away from us, the light that's traveling between that star and us literally gets stretched.
It does.
As the object's moving away from us, and that drags the polarity of the light into the red, or if it's coming towards us, into the blue.
It pulls into the blue, yeah, red and blue shift, yeah.
Because the frequency of the pulsar is such a constant, and that's basically what you rely on the speed of light. It's a constant, isn't it? That it's a known value, so you can use that to find out other information.
Exactly, and then you can triangulate from there. So, good question, well answered.
Yeah, well, we're all over it. We're all over it, Bazza. We're all over it.
Yeah. Oh, we watch far too much Discovery Channel.
Yeah, we need to get out more.
Now, there isn't it that when you look up in the Milky Way sky, or you look up at the night sky, all you see are stars in the Milky Way. You know, the 300 to 400 billion our galaxy, and 1 in 5 of those they now reckon has life, or has a planet in the habitable zone where liquid water can pool on the surface. 1 in 5. That's quite an incredible number, and like
it is when you look at you I don't know how many of you, it's sort of topical, but going off a segue in a little bit, these a video that's it found where the Hubble Space Telescope focuses on a blank bit of sky and then zooms in, and when you start to see, have you seen it? The deep field, and you see just the sheer amount of stars that are out there and how many, the possible of containing planets that are like life sustaining. It's mind blowing. It is mind blowing,
and it just keeps finding another more 10,000 galaxies, another 10,000 galaxies inside that, deeper again, and just wow.
Like they say now, Bazza, don't ask me to explain this one, but there's also like the invisible universe, isn't there? They're saying that we're never going to be able to see because it's the stars are actually traveling away from us faster than the light can ever reach us. Right. So when they went from like 2 billion galaxies to now they think it might be 20 trillion or 200 trillion, or the number is almost unfathomable.
Ridiculous. The likelihood. Sorry, Damien, go on, brother.
The observable universe is only 13.8 billion light years, isn't it? Which is basically the Big Bang till now, because the light we're seeing from 13.8 million years ago, we're essentially going back in time, aren't we? Because that's what was this. We can't go further back in time than the Big Bang, the singularity event. However, the universe can exist beyond that because it's been expanding at faster than the speed of light since the singularity event. But
so we can only trace the time relative to us due to the singularity event because of the speed of light. There's planets that have moved quicker than that are not subject to the same calculations.
It's hard to, people don't get that one confused. They don't understand that there's more to it than just the observable, but we won't ever see it,
and everything beyond that is estimate. Basically,
the likelihood of Earth being the only populated planet by intelligent life is, I think anybody with any degree of being a reasonable thinker or a logical thinker is like, come on, you seriously need to give your head a wobble. That's because I'm reasonable,
I got a comment literally today saying that they were going to refuse to watch my video about aliens because anybody that defends the idea of aliens is denying the existence of Jesus, and therefore is wrong.
But the Vatican even came out and said that exactly the opposite statement of that in, I think, 2015. It said, belief in extraterrestrials doesn't mean that God and Jesus don't exist.
Yeah, please don't.
Please.
Jesus, keep giving us money. But yeah, I mean, it is a good point now, man. I made the point that he was making quite a lot of assumptions about Jesus. Maybe we should let Jesus talk for himself. But that seemed to make him more angry.
I wonder why.
I don't know. I thought it was quite clever myself, but
Is it clever? Well, no, I'm not going to say this next statement because that'll make it even worse. Please
okay,
continue.
we'll move on then to back to Zeta Reticulum.
Yes,
Yeah, I was about to defend you, but my comment would have made it worse, so I'll leave it.
Bazidibel's got the thing. It's got nothing to do with God. I love. There's a Stephen Hawking saying that he says he can describe everything that happened after the Big Bang. He can describe everything that's happened in the universe, until about 13 seconds after the Big Bang. Everything before that is God's territory. And I always quite like that. It's sort of a bit wimpy because he's sort of like giving into the Christians a little bit, but
a little bit.
I always quite like it.
But it's only because it's something science is yet to be able to explain, isn't it? That's where you do find God. It's
I think
understanding, isn't it?
I think there's a mixture of that, and when people get closer to the acceptance of their own immortality, you do see people lean towards edging the bets when it comes to God and the rest of it. I've seen it many times over the years. When people, I'm getting older,
fickle, selfish creatures. We'd rather.
I'm going to edge my bets. Maybe. I'm not entirely convinced that the big G Meister in the sky doesn't exist after all. I'll just say the odd prayer or two just in case,
Yeah. So just to very quickly talk about Bob Lazar, because we've all done videos on Bob Lazar. Please go back and have a look at our other videos on Bob Lazar. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you all. So it's a bit of a chicken and the egg scenario here. This isn't the first one as well. We're going to talk about the media and stuff in a minute, which is very chicken and egg.
Wow.
Does this confirm what Bob Lazar said? Because basically Betty and Barney Hill said the same thing, or this actually independent astronomer said the same thing, or does it sort of like put more doubt on Bob because you think, oh, Bob has obviously just read this. This would have only been released 7 or 8 years before Bob's story came out, or 10 years before Bob's story came out. So does this help his story or take something away from it?
Damien, go.
I don't know. It is a difficult one. It's interesting. They both. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know whether it really helps Bob's story or not.
It's a toss a coin situation, isn't it, for me on this one? But
let me have a go.
Yeah, I got a cynical side in it. Right, I know what Dave's going to say.
Let me have nothing can save what Bob Lazar has said. There isn't anything that anybody can say that can defend Bob Lazar's actions. Apart, it is a tough one, as Damien says, right? Because you've got what has gone before. When you've got something that has gone before, you've got the element of creativity. You've got the element of interpretation. There is also the element of lying. There is also, does it back up Bob Lazar? No. I think any case that has gone before can suggest there's such a thing as auto-suggestion and pattern matching, and you'll be aware of this, Jamie. It goes on every day. It's part of human psychology. We're prone to doing it, and if people come forward with certain experiences, Damien himself mentioned embellishment. People are going to do that, and he can use retrospectively looking back at previous cases, especially famous ones, to solidify or validate his own story. So does it help? No, and I think it should be taken as a completely separate event.
Yeah. No, I would agree. Just very quickly, Dave. So Bob Lazar, liar or something to it?
Something to it.
Okay.
If only because I'm going to shoot myself in the foot here, but if only because when he first started to make his claims before, doing his interview on radio and all the hiding who he was thing, being able to take people to certain locations on certain days and say on this, I'm not trying to say that what he was showing people was anything other than just weird, but being able to say on such a night, you will see such a thing.
The timetable of weird and could arrange to have people come see it. Yeah, that does.
That takes some beat in the fact that he will say on such a night above Groom Lake or out here over this area, you're going to see this kind of thing, and take people there and they actually see these UFOs or these unmanned vehicles, or however you want to describe them. There is something to that.
Maybe, or he could have just spotted it himself when he was, out and about.
But that would
maybe. I don't know.
That would still add validity to the fact that he knew something was going on there at the very least. If you take away the rocket cars and the prostitution racket and all that kind of thing, he's probably a very stand-up guy,
And Area 51 back then was
racket.
Not even recognised, was it? It wasn't even acknowledged, was it, by the US government until Obama, was it? I don't think. Area 51.
It's never been in the prostitution ring thing, though. I think that a lot of people use that as a reason why we shouldn't believe.
I knew you'd jump on that one.
Look, he's in prostitution ring. I think it supports him. He went up in front of court with being threatened with prison.
He did.
Which in Nevada it never happens. And he basically said, I've got a degree from MIT and the other one in physics and electronic engineering. And the judge went, you can't prove that. And he went, but I have. And they basically said, look, tell the truth or you're going to prison because we need to substantiate what you're telling us. If we can't substantiate it, you're going to prison. And he refused point blank to change his story. He does not look like the sort of person that would do well in prison. To me,
no,
I think he'd be someone's love child. Really quick.
Well, there you go. It depends on how you look at your interpretation of doing well. I'm sure he'd have gone down well with Mr. Big, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
Exactly. So
I also think the CIA have the power to erase someone's existence if they felt like it as well.
I genuinely believe.
Probably.
I genuinely think that this is a simple question, right? If you're in charge of Area 51 and you've got this alien technology that you don't understand, you think they're going, right, we've got physicists coming at the yin yang. We've got loads of physicists. There's this guy, and he thinks outside the box. He's built a rocket car. He's worked down at Los Alamos and all this stuff. Yep. Maybe he'll bring something a bit different. And you know what? If he tells anyone, we can destroy him.
Or kill him. Yeah, all right then. We'll do it.
I don't think they'd have thought that. I think they'd have gone, yeah, why not?
So my question to both of you then would be Bob Lazar.
I believe
complete crank or something, right? Thank you, Damien.
Yeah, I want to revisit it again and go in more depth.
No. I was put on the spot.
Okay.
Damien.
Sorry. What were the two options?
Believe him or don't believe him.
Yeah, but something to him or complete crank.
Something to him.
Yes, we're all in agreement.
I will remind you, Jamie, they've done 2 videos. One of them was called "We Believe Bob Lazar." So
nice.
You should probably, stick to what
I've watched some more stuff recently that's brought some stuff into question. But then it's he's a difficult one. I am very sat on the fence with him, to be honest.
Yeah. I think it's. I remember we did a video on this, and we talked about how they threatened to kill him and what have you. And I said, look, I want to publicly announce now that I love my life, and I would do these videos, and we're probably going to some list somewhere at the CIA or at Langley. And I love my life. If anybody ever suicides me, they did it because I want to live forever. All right.
I like that phrase. It's only really become a phrase, hasn't it? After Epstein suicided himself. Yeah.
You've got to sort of ask yourself, anybody who would want to come into the public eye with such sort of claims and have their life destroyed and still stick by the story, what they've got to gain from it.
Yeah.
And that always makes me, unless they're completely crazy and they don't care about what happens to the life. But you've got to question whether somebody like that's willing to have their life completely destroyed by the very thing that they're saying and holding true to that story. And there's something in that. There's something in that says there's something about his character at the very least.
Thanks, Bazza.
Yes, Bazza. We're probably all on a watch list. We've watched far too many videos of too many things that you're not supposed to watch, probably.
I get blocked on Facebook so much. Right.
I know. I mean, like the government would be like the MI5, MI6. Well, no, it'd just be GCHQ, won't it? Now, like the NSA of the UK.
Yeah. It'd be men with Phil.
I flew over GCHQ and I had my flying lesson not long ago. Nothing to do with anything.
Yeah. Imagine all the data they're harvesting there. It must be a massive place.
All of it. It's underground at GCHQ is just, it goes down 5 floors and it's just computer banks. It's three floors of computer banks and 2 stories of cooling systems. It's all that's down there. But anyway, right, before we tear this apart and we really get into the psychology of it and we start talking about whether hypnosis is bull or not, it's aliens, obviously. It's always aliens.
Yeah.
So is there anything to this story? Because it's so popular. Stanton Friedman was a firm believer that this was true and they were genuine. Is there anything or parts of this story that we think that tends to be true, that rings as true as what they're saying is honest?
Missing time seems to fit, doesn't it? There tends to be an experience of missing time with all abduction cases. Or I think in this case as well, they didn't even realise about the missing time after the event. Like you said, they went home and slept after getting back at 6, 7 in the morning. But it wasn't until they were quizzed later on about what time they'd actually arrived home, and they then did the math and then went, well, that's not right. That should have been a journey that took, what was it, 4.5 hours. And they took them, I don't know, 7 in the morning from, 10 at night? 10:30?
It took them about 4 hours.
9 hours.
They lost about 4 hours, and 35 miles, where they drove 35 miles and have no recollection of it at all.
Well, although you can drive 35 miles when you're tired and be not paying much attention and then not remember because you're on autopilot. I know you can do that because I've done it.
A lot of skeptics have said these guys are the poster boys for don't drive tired, basically.
So, and I can understand where that came from. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. I seriously do think there's a lot to that. Like I said, I've looked into this case quite a lot. There's a lot of comments and statements that were made by Betty that were just not made on the day, even under regressive hypnosis. These things weren't made. I mean, I want to go back over a couple of things just for the sake of it, because we do it the justice, I suppose. Barney was an avid plane watcher, and he tried to reassure Betty at the beginning that it was just a satellite. And they were claiming that it seemed to move with the car as it was driving, but it's down this curvy mountain road that was quite steep at times, and that it zigzagged and ducked and weaved behind trees and behind the mountain ridges like it was playing like cat and mouse with them. And they actually pulled over a few times to look at it through the binoculars. Like really well known, I suppose you call them picnic spots. Really, you mentioned one before, Indian's Head, and there's another one, the Old Man of the Mountain. Now, some of these spots give a view of this antenna system with a light on, and others obscure it completely. And as you travel down this road, which some ufologists have done, it comes and goes into view and looks like it's moving in between the trees. This flashing light on top of this beacon, is it an anti-collision light or something like that, I believe? Yeah,
it's a beacon, for aircraft. Yeah, they use it to judge the altitude as well, but yeah.
So as they're driving down this winding road, it does seem to zigzag between the trees.
Altitude changes.
Because of atmospherics as well. Sometimes it appears, in different weather conditions and atmospherics and air pressures, the humidity can change the way that you get a glow or the halo effect around a light, making it.
We've got a local one here. We've got a local one here, Dave. It's on the top of like a hill, just a big hill called Brecon Hill. And you can mistake that if you're driving around and see it like darting in and out and catches me out. And I look at it and I go, no, it's the light on Brecon Hill. And you still catch you out or make you look twice on odd occasions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. I mean, like I say, the Old Man of the Mountain was a big one where they could see it from there. And it was stationary, I believe, when they saw it from there, which it would be because it's on the top of an antenna. And another thing is, she also made a comment that she sort of stick to was where she refuted it straight away, and she said, Barney, if you think that's a satellite or a star, you're being completely ridiculous. So straight away she was inferring to him that it was anything other than what he was trying to explain away as being prosaic, which she would later do. She was also be the instigator of trying to bring it to the fore, to pushing it towards NICAP to look at these books on pre-existing UFO sightings. You'd had a lot over the years. What's that famous one where it goes past the telegraph towers. I think there's 3 of them, white objects. I forget the name of that particular sighting, but it's quite famous. You know, you've I think if you got the Stephen Mitchell case back then, and you know, you've obviously Lonnie Zamora, I think, as well. In fact, that case had already happened by that time. Of course, you've got the Kenneth Arnold sighting. So ufology is still relatively young, but it isn't completely in its infancy. It has been reported. Roswell, not so much, just in the papers, but then redacted. That really only come out in the 70s.
Yeah,
but they were
on about for about 20 years.
Yeah, but so it wasn't completely unnew. You've also got the fact that he was heavily suggested upon by his wife throughout his life. He was a war veteran. Yeah. Now, one of the things that she reported as saying is they started to pull on her teeth. And the reason that they were pulling on her teeth is to see if they were attached, because they didn't understand why her teeth didn't come out of her mouth, but Barney's did. Now, the reason that Barney's apparently, yeah, the reason that Barney's did is because a grenade went off close to his head. He was injured during the war, and he lost his teeth, so he wore false teeth because of this. Now, the other thing is that eventually this head injury killed him. You know, he died because of a head injury. He had reoccurring. Yeah, absolutely. He had post-traumatic stress disorder. He would have nightmares anyway, where he was being chased. He even described at one point that the men, because he didn't refer to them as aliens, as we mentioned before, he as wearing Nazi uniforms. They look like they're wearing Nazi uniforms. What the pictures that they done of these people. It also should be mentioned that John Fuller released pictures of these aliens, or these EBEs, that look nothing like what Betty and Barney Hill had described. But when these sketches come out, they've even got them in caps and they're wearing Nazi uniforms. He was fighting the Nazis. His nightmares, his PTSD was about fighting the Germans, and he'd been injured by a hand grenade. He would have moments of losing consciousness. He had suffered from migraines. He would see a lot of lights and flashing lights and auras that preceded a migraine. He had a lot of this head injury done a lot of damage to Barney. It really did, to the extent where he died just a few years after this experience. She was very vocal about the civil rights thing. She was very wanting to be in a position of authority. She was allegedly also wanting to be, on the church committee. She wanted to be out there in the public eye. So does that taint what happened? You know, the fact that she suggested a lot of things that happened to her husband. She changed the story constantly. She would change her description of what she saw even midway through a convention in the 70s when she was doing talks about she would change midway through her own conversation about what had gone on. So to change her own story midway through telling it so it got the correct response from a live audience, that has me questioning the validity about a lot of what she says.
She's claiming she remembers, even after the regressive hypnotherapy. Maybe she really doesn't. You know, like the thing about the leader, like the leader, well, I don't know, wasn't it one of the other alien crew that gave her the book and the leader stopped her from taking it?
The leader gave her the book.
No, it was the other way around. The leader gave her the book.
Was it? You think the leader would just overrule the other one? Whack. I made the decision, not you. Get in line. If it's 4.5 foot, weren't they? These men in military suits. That was another point I was going to make earlier in the show. What military units do we know of that have 4.5 foot men? Apart from maybe the China Communist Party's probably got some kind of.
I don't know where you're going.
It was just meant to be a joke. But anyway, you know what I mean? Like, 4.5 foot.
This is your thing, is describing them as 4.5 foot in uniforms, and then when given a description of what they are to an illustrator, if you look at the illustrations that were then conducted, these beings are now all of a sudden 7 foot tall. Now I will accept that people can forget what they might have experienced, but stick to your own narrative as you're saying it in real time. And given that there's a multitude of books given about it, and also a multitude of documentaries, by the time she'd passed, she was still talking quite vocal about her experience. It would still change, despite the fact it was well catalogued by allegedly what was supposed to be true in the 1960s, and then allegedly what was supposed to be true in the 1970s, and then allegedly what was supposed to be true in the late 1970s. And there's such a spectrum and diverse what actually went on. It's
I was just going to say, you said earlier
trying
that
to milk the story, isn't it, for money?
Yeah. We said earlier that the UFOlogy or ufology was in its infancy. I would disagree. I would argue that there'd been basically 10 years. They call it the UFO flap. We'd already had the invasion of Washington. They were already making B movies with UFOs in. They stood still come out by this point. I think
the Battle of Los Angeles as well.
Battle of Los Angeles was front page news, and the CIA were already taking a lot of interest into, trying to stop interest in this. They were basically ordered by the Robertson Report to actively stop people from getting interested in UFOs, basically. The movie Invaders from Mars in 1953 was a very popular movie at the time, and really had a lot of elements to that movie that are very similar to what Betty said happened, or Barney said happened. You've got the Twilight Zone.
It can't be ignored the fact of you've got War of the Worlds, the radio broadcast, as well, and that was massively influential. There was something else, a film that was released, and again I've forgotten. And Steve, who have done shows with in the past, he's a massive ufologist. He did mention a show that had aired just a couple of weeks before this event.
Twilight Zone.
It was the Twilight Zone. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
12 days before the hypnosis happened, and it had grey aliens in it. Let's talk about grey aliens briefly. Actually, greys are ingrained in our psychology. And I was just going through today looking at some of these shows, like Frisbee, Twilight Zone, Hocus Pocus, and a couple of other shows that came out at the time. It was black and white TV back then. So all of the aliens were grey.
Correct.
Because it's black and white telly. Is that
correct?
Relevant? Because we take TV for granted today, but can you imagine what it was actually like when it first came out on these TV shows with like sci-fi movies? Twilight Zone and stuff was actually on the TV, and you got your first TV in the late 50s or even early 60s. It would have really messed with the psychology of the people as well. I wonder how much of an impact it actually had on some of these people, particularly people that, like Betty, were potentially quite vulnerable to this.
I suppose it was chicken and the egg. Did the sightings come first, and the mass popularity of the sightings inspired the people to make the TV shows, or did the TV shows come first? And I think history would tell you the sightings came first and far predate the invention of the television.
You've also got to bear in mind as well that a lot of was it McKinville, actually, that video footage I'm talking about? Actually, might have just something like that. Anyway, a lot of the earlier sightings were actually Nordics during the flap, not greys. So described as having blonde hair and looking pretty much human, just with like almond type eyes, but not huge eyes like insectoid kind of eyes, like wrapped around the sides of the faces and everything, but like almond shaped dark eyes. And who was the one? I can't think of his name now, but he was it De Bois, Villa Boas or something? Villas Boas, who claimed he had sex with a female alien who, took him aboard a craft. I'm pretty sure it's Villas Boas, is it not? And she certainly wasn't a grey. So the greys almost became fashionable in a way. Like you say, after the way that they appeared on TV, because a lot of early reports were not of greys, they were of Nordics or different creatures that were like a tan brown in colour.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Well, they reckon the blonde-haired and blue-eyed Aryan race was the whole Hitler and the superior race was basically related to an extraterrestrial, better race perhaps than us. So. Who knows? Maybe that's why where the Scandinavians came from, and why all the Scandinavian women are so beautiful. Who knows?
Yeah.
Are you showing a
Um,
preference there, are you, with that statement, by the way?
No, not particularly. It's just a well-known sort of statement, isn't it? Generally, that. Well, no, actually, what it was, wasn't it? It was the Vikings, because they used to conquer, kill all the men, and take the good women, the pretty women, and they probably just long time of doing that. It just breeds it into the genes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That'll be why that happened.
Well, let's get back to Barney.
Sorry,
Rather than thinking about Damien's video collection. So,
Yeah, that's sort of where we're headed with that one. Yeah.
You've alluded, you've said about this a few times now, Dave, about Betty and what she did after Barney died. Like I said, we've always said Barney was on a game show. Betty was very keen to get into the limelight as much as she could. She then, that's it. She then sort of became a bit of a media darling within the ufology world. There was one story about the National UFO Convention in 1980, I read about today, where she was a guest speaker. She put a bunch of slides up of loads of UFOs that she said she'd seen over the years. She was seeing UFOs constantly. All of them were blobs and smudges and things on dark backgrounds and nothing particularly impressive. She used to go to UFO sort of like sit-ins where they would sit around with telescopes or just, almost like what we'd call like a CE5 sort of thing nowadays or something, with different people looking for UFOs. And she would constantly be saying she saw them, and everyone else was sort of like going, "What? We haven't seen anything." But in this 1980 convention, she sat there and talked for twice her time, a lot of time, and she basically got booed off the stage. And G'd off. They said that was when she really lost a lot of her credibility. My point, though, here is my nan talks crap. My nan can talk for England, and she comes out with some really random stuff. That doesn't mean she's a liar and it's nutter. It means she's old.
She was in the 60s during the 80s, if you think about it. She was born in 22.
So there are lots of reasons why she might have said a load of rubbish as she got older.
Dementia.
Does that mean what happened to them in the early 60s is a lie?
No, not necessarily.
No, I don't. No, not at all. I think the fact that she added to a story and changed it within a couple of years of it being fresh in her mind is enough to call suspicion on it. If you take aside what she was saying in the 70s and 80s, fair enough, granted. But so soon after the event?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, she would. I suppose the argument would be that she changed the story as because of the hypnosis, different things were coming to mind, and the aliens had messed with her mind or whatever. I think a big chunk of this, though, if we just talk about hypnosis really quickly, a big chunk of this, if you're a believer, is you are believing on. There's very little physical evidence, but the evidence is the hypnosis tapes, and they are compelling if you listen to them. So do we think hypnosis is real? Because I'm telling you now, you can get it on the NHS.
Yes, you can.
There's a lot of evidence to suggest for certain things hypnosis is very useful. Relieving anxiety, treating PTSD. These are things that hypnosis can work. Stopping you smoking, it can work. There's lots of arguments about how effective it is. But what do you guys think then? What do you think about the hypnosis element? Do you think it adds credibility, or is it a concern?
Well, I think that given that Damien's got the cleanest shirt I've ever seen in history, he should go first.
Right, okay. Right, yeah. Well, sorry, repeat the question there. I lost my train of thought, to be honest. I was expecting Dave to go off then for like on a few sentences.
You're going to sit back and say nothing for a minute,
when you just like, I had something and then gone.
I've got something to go off at. Don't worry, I'm ready to go. Just giving you go first.
No, I mean,
that's boy.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, but just phrase the question again, Jamie, and I'll
try again. Do you think hypnosis adds to this credibility? The fact that they were hypnotized and then they had they were able to remember these things, or do you think it's actually an issue in that it has been shown that hypnosis can cause false memories?
Right, and yeah, I mean it's such an inexact science. I suppose it's very difficult to know what it does produce, and the results can seem to be perhaps extremely varied from your comment there, where it produces false memories to some extent, and obviously in some people, or you can at least hypnotists can plant false memories in people. Well, we've seen it. We've seen Darren Brown do some very interesting things with people under hypnosis and under his persuasion and manipulation and you know, and I do wonder whether some people in history may have just been the Darren Brown of their time. But anyway, yeah, but he's just that good at deceiving, isn't he, and manipulating, and what did he do? He got someone to believe that they killed somebody, didn't he? When they didn't, so he basically implanted a false memory of that person killing someone in their own mind.
Mostly suggestion and a lot of psychology.
It was, and not much hypnosis, but I don't know. Seems reasonably relevant. But yeah, hypnosis. Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I'd like to think it gives it more credibility. That hypnosis is regressing to them to perhaps some state where they can remember something that perhaps something has tried to stop them from remembering. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the false memories?
Well, I was going to say, on Darren Brown, you're saying about how it's relevant. I think it's very relevant, but I think it's about the psychological thing, classical priming and conditioning, because possibly that's what Barney was actually a victim of without realising it, and maybe not intentionally by Betty either. But I think he was primed. He believed what he said, but maybe that's not necessarily because it happened. Those because Betty did believe it. But anyway, studies by Harvard have actually shown that about 10% of people are very hypnotizable, because that's a word, susceptible to hypnotism. Most people can be hypnotized, but hypnotism is not what you see on the TV. It's basically a deep, relaxed state where you go and you can be very suggestible in these states, but you will not say or do anything that you don't want to say or do. You can't hypnotize somebody and tell them to jump off a bridge. They won't do it unless they want to. It's more about taking boundaries down. I think being hypnotized is like having about 8 pints. You're just really susceptible to things. But anyway, Dave.
I suppose it's another state of consciousness, isn't it? It's almost like they're moving you into a trance state, isn't it?
When they've done MRIs,
yeah,
they can actually tell the difference. Different parts of your brain become active when you're hypnotized. So there is a medical, observable, empirical evidence that people can be hypnotized.
Does it go similar to a sleep state where you start repairing and stuff like that? Do you know?
It's similar. It's similar in some ways, but not in others.
Not really. It's sort of, yeah. It's different because your brainwave patterns are completely different in sleep state than they are in
theta waves.
State.
Similar, but
yeah,
in other ways it's very different. Yeah.
Your gamma waves and
right. I'm going to go look into that.
Stuff. Okay.
Not now. Do it later.
Yes, you haven't got time for it now, Mr. Purcell.
It's Daz. Daz is for whites. Go on, Dave. What do you think?
Got me Daz White's on.
Daz White's on. You both sort of covered it in many ways. There's it's down to the person. Now I've like yourself, Jamie, studied various elements of obviously psychology and sociology and so on and so forth. And there's certain ways of getting people into a certain state when you're doing counselling, whether it's grief counselling or anything else, to get people to open up, to relax, and to let down barriers, as you say, because the important thing is that people believe in what is happening or take part or a participant in what is happening. And it's the same thing with hypnosis. You have to be willing to be able to take part in it and to associate that what's going on is either beneficial or that it works. So there's almost like a sort of like belief system in what you're undertaking. Now, I've been subject to this because of certain things that have gone on in my life, what they call rewind therapy rather than actual. They don't really sort of call it hypnosis per se, but like rewind therapy, as if you're using a video player to cut out certain segments of your life and remember areas that were on either side of the thoughts that you don't want to remember, so you concentrate upon them instead. So a bit like when people suffer from something which is, like tinnitus, you can't get rid of tinnitus, but you can use noise generators, which are similar to hearing aids, which program your brain in a way to concentrate upon that particular frequency instead of the one which is driving you to despair. So you sort of like suggestion. Now, if you listen to a lot of these regressive hypnotherapy sessions that have been undertaken by various ufologists and researchers over the years, all you need to do is pay attention to the questions that they're asking as well, because the questions are suggestive, they're auto-suggestive. Now, as a paranormal investigator myself, when you and other people, no doubt, I'm in the side chat, and you guys doing your research, when you interview a witness or you interview a client, you can't use certain terminology or phrases such as what sound did it make, because it may have never made a sound, but you've suggested that it does. Now, people will pattern match certain elements within, you know where I'm coming from, don't you, Damien? You get what I'm saying? So they'll say, well, actually, now that I think about it, it made a humming sound. Now, it might have never made a humming sound, but you've suggested it did. Like, it's like, what color eyes did they have? Now, they could have been they could have been a cyclops. They didn't have eyes plural. They had eyes singular. So you got to be careful.
You always
about
go for TED, don't you?
Yeah.
Tell, explain, discuss.
And when I've listened to so many of these, I mean, Bud Hopkins, bless him, massive proponent of regressive therapy and hypnosis when it comes to CE4 and abductions and stuff like that. But you listen to a lot of the recordings, and even John Mack, and there is a lot of suggestive questions and prompting that's going on in these sessions, rather than just letting people come forward, rather than helping people drop the barrier. There's such a thing as human givens, where you speak to people about their own self-worth and what they deserve as a human to feel for themselves and the way that they think of themselves, which can get people to drop barriers as well. But in psychology, this is a massive part of psychology. And people who don't study or haven't studied it don't understand that psychology, if you plays a massive part in your life, and it can be manipulated. The way that you think and you interact with a person, the way that you judge yourself within your environment, can be massively manipulated if people know how to do it. And it can be trigger words, certain sentences, and things like that. So for me, hypnosis, does it work? If you want it to, yes. And if you're willing it to, yes. Is it an absolute? Well, like Jamie said, you can't tell somebody to jump off a bridge.
No, it's like the placebo effect.
They actually do describe it as whether it is a placebo effect, in that if you think it'll work, it'll work. If you don't, it won't. And that's the same. It's like a super placebo effect.
Yeah, which is weird, isn't it? With no medicine, that people's mind is actually the thing that's making your body heal, not the pills that you're being given from hospital by various pharmaceutical companies that have made billions off of them.
If you have a life-threatening illness, they reckon you're 20% more likely to survive if you have a positive mental attitude. So they've spent a lot of effort to now try and get people to think themselves better. Because it works.
Yep.
20% of the time.
And this is one thing I've always said to you, isn't it, Jamie? I think your mind's more powerful than anything that you could, perhaps ever take to alter its consciousness. And then therefore, with that belief, I think I'll always be all right.
Exactly.
The way you're thinking, yeah.
If we get away from aliens, I think one of the things, everybody that ever spoke to Barney, Betty and Barney, they always said that they believed that Betty and Barney Hill believed what they were saying. All the UFO researchers pretty much that spoke to them, interviewed them, said they don't necessarily believe them, but they believe it. Even the hypnotherapist, this Dr. Simon guy, I keep calling Dr. Simon, I don't know if he's a doctor or not, he even said, I believe they believe it. He didn't believe it was anything to UFOs. He believed there was a trauma. So there were a couple of theories. One of the theories is MK Ultra. Now, I actually quite like this. MK Ultra sounds ridiculous, but we know it happened. We know there was this 10-year program at least.
Yeah.
They were using university students, dosed them up with LSD, all sorts of things. This project went on and on and on, and we don't know what on earth they could have done.
Yeah, a decade of passive aggression.
Exactly. A lot of research going on. One of the big points that they make, though, these believers that these could have been a victim of MK Ultra in some way, is that they seem to have access. You go through the story in the timeline, there's a lot of colonels and majors and captains and things that, like, there's a big military influence throughout. They seem to gain access to military personnel really easily. You know, they phoned up the Air Force Base and made a report, and they spoke to a major, somebody, you know, and this sort of thing. They seem to get through to the military personnel. Was that because this was done on purpose, it was planned, and this was actually, they gave them access? So, bet you Barney Hill just phoned. I was like, yeah, I bet they did, because we know what we did to them last night. So, you know.
You know that
Is that
alien
possible?
reproduction vehicle that we've got, yeah, and that team we keep sending out to do fake abductions and scare up people. Yeah. Was that them we picked up last night? Yeah, it was.
And I could see how these would be targeted
Very
as
cynical,
well. Because, but I could see how these would be targeted because, I mean, an interracial couple, the way they were, him, guessingly an ex-military man as well. I could see from a psychology point of view, they'd be quite an interesting subject matter to mess with and see what happens.
Because of the interracial marriage in the 60s. And it'd definitely get public attention, wouldn't it, as well, because of them being interracial, as well as the weird abduction story. I guess it's probably going to make more headlines or more people read it. I would, bigger pull,
make the story even better. I think it could hold water, this theory. But it's all circumstantial.
No, but we like a bit of that. We like a bit of that here. I mean, surely people are starting to see that like tune in everywhere. I'm pretty sure when they tune in with you guys over long before I was involved, they sort of knew that anyway. But I'm fairly sure it's coming to the fore.
Still have a go in the comments later, though. But go on.
Oh, absolutely! I loved it.
Not our lovely subscribers, idiots that watch it later. But
you absolutely beautiful people out there.
You beautiful people.
It can't be ignored, of course, that there's a lot going on regarding a lot of these sightings, and Roswell the military were involved at a high level even then, you know. Yes. And was it just par for the course? There'd been a lot of sites by this time, a lot of sightings, a lot of reports. You've got Blue Book and all that going on. There. Yeah, the Brookings report.
If we do ever find anything, we better hide it. They can't handle the truth. So that was pretty much the start of molding the X-Files.
Yeah. You can't handle the truth. So is it just par for the course that if there's a UFO sighting in the US in the 1950s, 60s, so on and so forth, that these people, it's going to go to a high level or a high authority just so they can put a blanket on it, dispel it, dispute it, whatever? Is it because they're feeding it?
Men in Black are already probably there. We just don't know it. It's just hidden from you. They've even told you, Men in Black, read the tabloids. It tells you what's going on in the tabloids. No. Who knows? But it'd be nice if it was, wouldn't it? I'd like to believe that.
Kind of, absolutely agree with you.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, I was just tangential thinking.
Truth, or they made up the truth. I like that statement. What is true? It's what they tell us is true.
But doesn't everybody sense things slightly differently? Like some people are colourblind and they can't sense colours in the same way you do. Is their truth different to yours because they saw it in a different
don't colour? Start me off on that trick. My present isn't necessarily your present. You could be experiencing this now as a past memory, although I'm living it in the now. You know.
Yeah, it's totally. We're on two different timelines potentially. But anyway,
whatever's going on is whatever the simulation tells me is going on. So
there you go, Matrix man.
We're all plugged in.
Yeah, you're probably right. The math say we're in a simulation, doesn't it? If the math doesn't lie, really. It's the language of the universe. It's interesting that it's also the language of the computers that we're building.
Yeah. We'll go into that in another video one of the days, mate, because the simulation theory is complicated.
No, I wasn't going down that one now.
I've watched several videos on it and I still don't understand it. So the last
I do like the way you have to occasionally rein it. Sorry, I was just going to say, I do like the way you have to occasionally rein him in there, Jamie. No, we're not going into that now. No.
I know him very, very well.
Jamie's gone fishing again, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Calm yourself down, laddie.
When we do recordings, I'm just sat there nodding, going, I'm editing this out. But live,
Yeah,
I can't. I've got to tell him to shut up.
nodding sagely in the background there.
Sometimes we wander off, and sometimes it's absolute gold. The way Damien's brains work is, whenever you watch our videos, just watch Damien, because the way his brain and his mind works, sometimes you just have to sit back and just enjoy it. Other times,
Basically,
go,
people,
shut up, Damien.
what that was, it's like a verbal, one of them shepherd's crook that you see come from the side of a stage around a guy's neck and pull him off when he goes too far. That's what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, okay.
Exactly. Love you, buddy. Last theory that I have. This is actually what I possibly believe. They talk about, particularly in their, what they said that they initially remembered, about 5 men surrounding their car. They talk more than once about a roadblock, but then they never really elaborate on that. And the researchers don't seem to ask them what do they mean by that. There's once a point she says she is forced to walk into the woods by 2 men. Again, UFOologists don't seem to ask her a great deal about that. This was an interracial couple in the 60s. They say that was fine and nobody ever gave them any grief. But again, I don't believe that. And
So
again, this could have been
abducted by some KKK.
I'm wondering whether this was some sort of interracial assault. And the way they initially talk about
LSD?
it. Yeah, well, no, I actually don't think so. I think that psychologically, she was a big believer in UFOs. Her sister had seen a UFO not long before. It was very big in modern culture and the culture at the time about UFOs and the fear of UFOs. It was very much intertwined with the fear of Russians and things. There was a psychological basis there, and I think something happened that she couldn't get her mind around or rationalize. I think so. She created this story, and Barney basically was dragged along with it. That is what I believe. They were not racist aliens, Streamy.
How do you know? Apparently, the Greys aren't very nice. Supposedly, apparently they're they're quite nasty piece of work. So maybe, I don't know. Possible.
But that would fit everything that I think they said initially. It would also fit that then the story got elaborated upon over time, because that's what unfortunately these people do when they're in these psychological traumas, and they fill in the gaps with basically modern culture and what they've seen on the telly, which they actually seem possibly to have done. You know, there's an Outer Limits episode that was aired a couple of days before the first hypnosis sessions, and when you look at the alien from the Outer Limits episode, it looks an awful lot like the alien that then Barney drew and after the hypnosis episode bits. We only have their word for most of what happened. The physical evidence could easily have happened caused by some sort of attack. You know, a ripped dress, a scuffed shoes, the damage to the car, even possibly. To me, it seems to be there's a far more mundane and sad story rather than the alien story, which I then have to ask the question, why is this considered to be one of the top 3, like you said, most convincing alien cases? I worry about that. What do you guys think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, I find it really sad, to be honest.
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah, I'd like to believe that perhaps there was an original incident that did occur, but there's not much evidence for it. The only real physical evidence, I suppose, that you couldn't get from some kind of other incident would be the marks on the boot of the car, maybe. And then from what they said, there was the sound that, like, was it? Not hypnotized them, but stunned them and stopped them, paralyzed them, stopped them being able to move. And when they put, what was it, magnets, a compass by it, then obviously the compasses would just spin, which you do get that with other UFO landing sites when, there's been some kind of physical evidence left on the ground and they've done the same thing. Or Geiger counters. I wonder if they checked with a Geiger counter whether they had been exposed to any higher levels of, when did the Geiger counter get invented? we've had
They would have
nuclear
been
power
invented. They
stations.
wouldn't have had access because, I mean, the
Yeah,
ufologists didn't come for like 4 or 5 days till after the event, did it? So
I suppose you wouldn't know to check for it as much back then. Would you? You'd still know about radioactive power, and you still understand radiation, so you'd still have guide
yeah,
counters.
but
I don't know.
the military wasn't involved, mate. So nobody came from the military to investigate this. This was just ufologists. This wasn't like Roswell. They took
She
guide
was.
counters to Roswell. Go on, sorry, Dave.
They were aware of sorry, Jamie. They were aware of radiation, which is the very reason that they approached the Air Force in the first place. Is because this is what Betty said. She was concerned that it was radiation. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, the military didn't involve this. The Geiger counters weren't on every shop corner. You know what I mean? They wouldn't have been able to get hands on one to do the test. The military would have had to have come and tested, but they didn't.
Yeah,
they fobbed her off.
Well,
initially,
even the United States Army Air Force in the 1980s, or the early 1980s, there was only certain personnel what had access to Geiger counters. You've just got to look at the Rendlesham Forest case to see that, and this is 20 years after the event almost.
Exactly. So they weren't a common piece of technology, so they wouldn't. I don't think they'd have had that. So is that where we're at then? Really, this was. We genuinely believe something happened. I actually genuinely believe, at very least, Betty believed her story. But aliens.
I think Barney was a war veteran who was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as significant head injuries, brain injuries. He was subject to nightmares. He was subject to influence. I think Betty had an overactive imagination. There was an object that was responsible for a big light that can explain scientifically, geologically, and topographically why it was dodging between the trees. There is nothing to substantiate the marks on the cars, on the boot of the car. Nothing to substantiate the missing time. The scuff marks on the shoes. They even admitted they got out of the car. They were in picnic areas on Old Man's Head on the mountain, Indian's Head. There's too much. I'm not totally convinced about this one. He was in the middle of a flap. There was B movies, UFO movies, aliens, Martians invading movies were all over the place. They were, they said they weren't picked on or because there was, mixed race couple. I again don't believe that. There's a lot of evidence to suggest Betty wanted to be a significantly known member within the community. It doesn't hold a lot of water for me personally. It's in the big three because of the allegations that were made, and just because it was one of the early ones.
Is it in the big three at least partly because of Stanton Friedman? Because he did believe them.
He did. I would have to agree with that as well. Yeah.
Did she ever take a polygraph?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, you can cheat a polygraph though, can't you?
You can, I know, but it's just interesting if someone's willing and did it first time on demand. Or what I was going to say about missing timers is though, the interesting thing I always think about missing timers, I thought it just came to my head with a lot of these abduction cases, is you imagine like when you pick an insect up from the garden, an ant or a spider, and you're playing with it as a kid, you don't put it back in the same spot in the garden. If you put it back, it's probably quite a bit away, isn't it? Well, if they've got crafts that are capable of traversing through space and time, warping the fabric of space-time itself, like popping you back like 5 days later and a few hundred miles away, that's like, well, that's close enough. Dunk. No, do you not? You don't care about the ant. You throw him back on that planet. It doesn't matter if it's not quite in sync with the timeline that you took it from. I don't know. I just suddenly thought of that.
Let's see if we can get that trending on
no, I like the way you're thinking. Yeah. The ant theory. We're going to call that from now on.
Yeah. I think we should look at the Fire in the Sky event shortly in the next few weeks. For me, an event that maybe has more water until I probably research it more and then find out that's all Huey as well. But
I would massively be up for that one. Yeah, but it's been a big one throughout my life like that. Yeah.
Let's do that in the next few weeks. Yeah. Guys, if you want to see that episode, please drop a comment, tell us, and we will look at that. I'll have to watch the movie again. I haven't watched that movie in years.
Good film.
Good film. Good film. But I think that's where we're leaving it then, isn't it, really, guys? That good story, but probably a sad reality. Masking something
Caught up in the
awful that
times.
possibly happened.
It's just two little physical
caught up in the times.
evidence for me for some of the cases that we have got a lot better physical evidence. You know, tracked on radar, Geiger counter readings like well above background radiation level. Do you know what I mean? There's some real interesting, juicy cases out there with far better physical evidence than this case has got, really.
Exactly.
And
But
too
so
many
if you
inconsistencies.
go onto our channel and go to that playlists, you'll see that there's 1942 to 1952, 10 years that created ufology or something like that it's called. We do Project High Jump there, but we can definitely come back to it because we never actually bothered touching on Hollow Earth when we did that, which is a bit of a oversight. But go and have a look at that. It's a nice little series. And then we also did 1942 to 1952, and don't mention Roswell, not once.
I think it's
That's
because of the
good.
connotations that Hollow Earth, I suppose, has with being a bit linked to flat Earth, perhaps. I don't know.
It's mental, so we ignored it. But how did we do 1942 to 1952 and not mention Roswell? I don't know how we managed that. I think we decided we were going to do it as a special episode, didn't we? Never got around to it. But yeah,
by being very focused and not being predictable. That's what I was.
Yeah. We will get back to it at some point. The anniversary is coming up. We'll probably do it then. But hey, we'll do a live video around the anniversary because Roswell's one of those that everyone was getting their teeth stuck into. But I need a 3 or 4 weeks notice because the research on that one will be interesting to say the least. But thank you very much, guys, and thank you again, Nelly, Dave, everybody that's been on today. We really, really appreciate everybody. Stroomy. I'm just going back through.
Thank you all.
John Hiking is our mate. John Boy, go subscribe to his channel.
Thankfully, we tried to get back to most of your comments or as many as we could.
Yeah, Wisteria Energy Twister. I don't know your actual proper name, but thank you so much again. Everybody that's been on tonight. It's really, really interesting channel and really instant chat. Even really instant channel. It is an instant channel. You should subscribe. Really instant chat. Thanks so much. If you could go across to, if you are new to the channel, go across to Tadau's Lives as well and or Lives and subscribe to his channel too. You can share the video wherever you like.
Thank you.
Please join our channel if you'd like and join Dave's. And thank you very much. And we'll see you soon, guys.
See you next time.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.